HARK, again, I don't need these. I don't know why I keep putting them on. We are here. It is time for a different video for Star Wars Unlimited. I talked a little bit before about going over the aspects for each aspect, obviously, in Star Wars Unlimited, doing a coverage of all the cards, where they're useful, what decks they go in. We don't have the full list as of recording just yet, but I was asked on one of my more recent videos to go over my 18 through 1 ranking for all the leaders that we know of for Spark of Rebellion, because we have all of them, all 18 total. I will say that that is not the type of video that I am going to create. I am not a huge fan of tier lists. If you're looking for tier lists, Tower number 9, I believe Late Night Gaming and also Garbage Rollers generally put out tier lists when it comes to things like that, where it's the best card, worst card, so on and so forth. I personally don't like tier lists because it leaves out a lot of context, and context is for kings. But there is a place for content that says, what are my top leaders? What are the leaders that I think have the most potential? And what are the leaders that I think need a lot of work? And that's where I'm going to go. So in this video, I'm going to go over 9 different leaders. We're going to go in order of leaders that I probably will be personally playing, but I think are the best in the bunch. Then the next 3 are going to be leaders that have the ability to come out of nowhere, or potentially do something that people aren't expecting, or be better than what most people are thinking. And then, of course, it's not necessarily the bottom 3, but it is 3 leaders that I think need the most work to work well. And I do hope somebody can bring along something like that to break them. So that's that. This is this. We're going to head on to this, and I'll see you on the flip side. Our first leader we're going to be taking a look at is, of course, Leia Orana, Alliance General. We'll go over her abilities really quickly, and then I'll give you a rundown of what I think makes this leader strong and how it will move forward with Spark of Rebellion gameplay. We do have the front side that says action, exhaust this leader, attack with a rebel unit, then you may attack with another rebel unit. As an epic action, she will deploy for 5 resources, and then her flip side, she's a 3/6 rebel official. She is raid 1, so when she attacks, she gets +1/+0. And when she completes an attack, you may attack with another rebel. A lot of people have been pretty high on this card. I haven't necessarily been as high, but as we've been getting more cards, I've been seeing more and more value to her. So Leia as a whole is an aggressive rebels go wide style deck. You're going to be using a lot of little units such as Battlefield Marine, Echo Base Defender, potentially the newly previewed Bail Organa that I may or may not have talked about as of yet. And then you have to figure out what your secondary aspect is going to be. I think a lot of people are playing aggression, and I think that is a great choice. That's probably the top choice for Leia Organa at this point. Her deck is going to differ from Sabine in that you're focused on keeping your units on the board so you can continue to make attacks, but you also have cards that help you mitigate what your opponent is doing in things like Strike True. So most of your units and power plays are going to come from command. But if you do go command aggression, utilizing either one of the 30 health bases or Tarkin Town, you'll have backup units such as Red 3 or Benthic 2 Tubes, or something like Keep Fighting if you will have lower power units that want to continue attack, so on and so forth. So Leia Organa, I believe, not necessarily the top leader. These are not going to be in any specific order, but is definitely one of the better leaders that's going to be coming out of the first wave of decks going into Spark of Rebellion. Next, we have Sabine Ren, Galvanized Revolutionary. I do have an old deck list that is not necessarily complete at this point, and I have not updated, but if you're interested, go check out my Star Wars Unlimited playlist or the rest of the videos on this channel. There is one, I believe it's called Aggressive Rebellions. I'll put a link to it in the description below so you can check it out. But again, going over what Sabine brings to the table. As an action, you can exhaust her to deal 1 damage to each base. You flip her, she becomes a 2/5 on 4 resources. On attack, deal 1 damage to each enemy base. Sabine is all about getting the damage onto the base. And you're going to be doing that by attacking with each of your units, using her base ability, being able to get things like Benthic 2 Tubes, Red 3, Partisan Insurgents, Fighters for Freedom, all of those types of cards for a cause I believe in, to be able to put that damage on your opponent's base. You still want to mitigate the units your opponent is using against you, but Sabine is basically trying to win before your opponent can get to the big end game plays such as Overwhelming Barrage, Devastator, Avenger, things of those nature. If you can get the lion's share of your base damage in before the end of round 4, you're in a very good place to be able to win that game by virtue of just making attacks. So this is one of the decks that I will probably end up playing right off the bat, essentially switching back and forth between having Sabine or Leia as the top aggression leader that I run. Aggressive, not necessarily aggression. The backup aspect that you'll be working with Sabine is most likely going to be cunning, but there is actually a very strong case, especially recently, to run either command or just double aggression. Some of the double aggression cards that we've seen, like Saw Gerrera, really do put the pressure on the opponent to have to deal with what your opponent has on the board in order to be able to stop Sabine's consistent just throw things at your face strategy. Command, however, same thing as Leia, is going to be more getting those units onto the board and attacking with them as best you possibly can, while giving buffs here and there and utilizing your unit's power to remove your opponent's units without taking the damage back on cards such as Strike True. So Sabine and Leia are going to be built similarly, but will end up playing a tiny bit different in just the way that they want to manage the board and put damage on your opponent's base. This could effectively be considered the same style of deck, but I do think Leia players will play different than Sabine players will play different than Leia players. Our last leader to cover in this first batch is, of course, everybody's favorite cunning leader, Boba Fett collecting the bounty. Front side, when an enemy unit leaves play, you may exhaust this leader. If you do, ready a resource. He deploys for 5 resources when you have it. He becomes a 4/7 Underworld Bounty Hunter. When this unit completes an attack, if an enemy unit left play this phase, ready up to 2 resources. Most people think that double cunning is probably going to be one of the stronger decks to put out right at the beginning of the game, or potentially if you're looking on a more attack-based strategy, you can run cunning aggression with this style of deck. I will likely end up running the double cunning because there's just so many different things that mesh with at least the theme of Boba Fett, and I do build most of my decks based upon a theme rather than a main good stuff strategy. Boba Fett is a very consistent leader when it comes to doing what you want to do, but you do have to think out your sequencing to make sure you get the benefit of those resources. Having that front side effect of being able to, when an enemy unit leaves play, you can ready the resource. You need to be ready to have a play ready to go for something like that. So having a couple of low cost events, characters, or upgrades in your deck, such as Greedo or Shoot First or Snapshot Reflexes, is going to give you the option to utilize that one resource you get back. On the flip side, however, you do want to make sure that you have the ability to clear an enemy unit when Boba Fett makes the attack, or have already cleared, and be ready to use those 2 resources. Boba Fett's going to have a couple of cards that are going to be on the top end of the scale: Bosk, Bounty Hunter Gang, Syndicate Lackeys, Jabba the Hutt, that are going to be necessary to make sure you can continue your strategy of getting your enemy's units down while dealing damage to the opponent's base. But you also want to make sure you have enough things that allow you to utilize the resources you're getting back. Anytime you waste the resources, you've lost what makes Boba Fett a great leader. Yes, he's a 4/7 and the highest statted leader at his cost, but at the same time, it is something that your opponent knows is happening and is going to want to focus that down to make sure you don't get those benefits before your opponent can deal with them. Those are the top 3 leaders. Let's head over to leaders with the most potential to surprise. Our first leader here comes in the Vigilance villainy flavor, and it is Iden Versio, Inferno Squad Commander. As an action, you can exhaust her. If an enemy unit was defeated this phase, you heal 1 damage from your base. Your epic action is 6 resources and flips into a 4/4 shielded Imperial Trooper unit. When an enemy unit is defeated, heal 1 damage from your base. Iden Versio's whole strategy is the control strategy. Her leader side is understated for 6 cost, but she does come in with a shield token, which means she's less susceptible to things that deal damage, but still susceptible to things that just straight up defeat you based upon having a certain amount of health. She does die to Dooku and Takedown and potentially Vigilance, but she won't die to Vigilance immediately, which means your opponent has to deal some amount of damage in order to be able to stop it. The most common removal, quote-unquote, spells, we'll say cards, in the game, Takedown and Count Dooku, will eliminate Iden on the board immediately. So you need to make sure your opponent doesn't have the resources available to do that to you, or prepare to bait those out with Iden's basically free deploy that requires that immediate level of attention. Otherwise, your health is going to get out of control on your base. I did play a game with this where I healed about 10 damage on the leader side and then a little bit of damage on the unit side, but it did allow me the opportunity to stay in a game that I was potentially losing and turning it into a winning game by just controlling my opponent's plays. You can go double vigilance for Iden Versio, but personally, my thought process is going vigilance command because it gives you access to overwhelming barrage, which is one of the top level combos with Iden Versio that makes a great card even better. You get your big ships like your Devastator. You have your ability to run things like Darth Vader, which are very good in Iden because it can deploy those extra things that can help you defeat your opponent's units and also potentially just get protection on your board in the form of Sentinels or Del Miko, which can make your opponent's events more expensive. Iden Versio can really realistically be played in any aspect, but I think her top aspect, as I said before, is going to be Vigilance Command. Our next leader is another aggression leader. This is Cassian Andor, dedicated to the Rebellion. For 1 resource and exhausting this leader, if you've dealt 3 or more damage to an enemy base this phase, draw a card. On 6, you'll flip, and he becomes a 4/6 rebel with Saboteur, and when you deal damage to an enemy base, you may draw a card. Use this ability only once each round. We've said before multiple times that card draw is almost always viable and almost always the thing you want to do. Fortunately, there's a leader coming on later where I don't think it's going to be viable enough, but Cassian realistically wants to play either a mid-game or control-based matchup with his cards, because you're only drawing one extra card per turn, but that extra card can potentially get you the extra gas you need to keep going, defensive units to be able to protect your side of the board, the offensive plays that you want to run to be able to eliminate your opponent's units, or the resources if you have good cards in your hand and you don't want to resource anything even though you have 2 cards coming up. The extra options that the 1 card per turn will give you is realistically one of the best options that Cassian has for him. And I think a lot of people are discounting what Cassian has available. Cassian, aggression, what's his backup? Well, you can go double aggression, you can go command, you can go cunning, you can go vigilance. There's actually really good options for each thing that is available to you. I believe that Cassian is going to be strong either as an aggression cunning leader or an aggression command leader, because most of the rebel strategies in command will be very helpful to Cassian to get those 3 damage on the board. But on top of that, the cunning strategies with the unit removal and the extra protection, the shields, and anything provided to you by that or snapshot reflexes is going to give you an option of continuing your attacks and being able to do that damage to your opponent's base, or at least control your opponent's side of the board for the remainder of the game. In terms of vigilance, you do have the basic tenets of takedown and vanquish and something like moment of peace if you want the shields, or repair if you want some health. But ultimately, unit-wise, I don't think vigilance is strong enough to support Cassian at this time. But I think the potential is here for Cassian to be a really cool leader when it comes to what your opponent is expecting out of the plays that you're going to be playing each game. Obviously, I didn't do the thing correctly in the last segment, so you did see what the final card of this batch is going to be, and it is Grand Admiral Thon, Patient and Insightful. His frontside abilities are: when the action phase starts, look at the top card of each player's deck so you have some knowledge. You can pay 1 resource and exhaust this unit. Reveal the top card of any player's deck. You exhaust a unit that costs the same or less as the revealed card. He is a 6 cost deploy. He becomes a 3/9 Imperial Official. Very good stats. When the action phase starts, look at the top card of each player's deck. On attack, you may reveal the top card of any player's deck. Exhaust a unit that costs the same or less as the revealed card. So Thrawn's strategy is knowing what the top cards of are each deck, and then being able to exhaust a unit pretty much whenever you want, once per phase, twice if you do it before he deploys and after he deploys on the round that he deploys. Thrawn is all about information, which means you're going to be running a control style deck. Thrawn is not going to do well as an aggressive deck, and I don't think he's going to do well as a mid-range deck. What you want to do is add extra utility to Thrawn with your cunning cards, and then pick either vigilance or command as your backup aspect to be able to provide you with the units that will help control your opponent's board or deal the damage, or the events that will also help you do that depending on which style you choose. The big payoff for Thrawn is getting to the late game and being able to play the bigger cards like Chimera, Avenger, Relentless, Devastator. If you go command, you can play something like Darth Vader to be able to get that extra utility onto the board and continue controlling your opponent's units by ambushing them. You do have the Gladiator Star Destroyer in space that'll help give you a Sentinel to protect your side of the board. But on the flip side, with the Vigilance side, you get Dooku, you get Takedown, you get Vanquish, you get Avenger, you get a lot of defeat that unit or choose units to defeat. Power of the Dark Side, another great option for something like that. The idea of Thrawn is control your opponent's board state until there's nothing left that they can do and then pick them apart. Thrawn is going to be a slow gameplay style, but it's going to be a style that is successful for people who are patient and know how to pick their targets. I would not be surprised if in competitive environments, Thrawn slowly inches up to the top as people really understand what Thrawn's strengths are. A lot of people see the 3/9 and go, cool, he's got good stats, but then see what he actually does. And because it is not an immediate payoff, they completely write him off because they are not patient. Thrawn is the patient man's game. It's literally in the subtitle, patient and insightful. And that's why I think he is up there in most potential leaders. And now we move into this needs help. Our first leader for this is IG-88 Ruthless Bounty Hunter. A lot of these leader picks, or some of these leader picks, are going to be like the easy bottom of the barrel targets in terms of what is available to them and what they want to be running. There are some things that could be coming in the future, but in set 1, I would not anticipate seeing a lot of these in competitive environments or even in the higher level of like, I want to do good casual. IG-88 Ruthless Bounty Hunter's front ability is exhaust this leader, attack with the unit. If you control more units than the defending player, the attacker gets +1/+0 for this attack. He flips at 5 resources and becomes a 5/4 Underworld Bounty Hunter droid, where each other friendly unit gains raid 1. IG-88's biggest problem is actually his backside. 5/4 for 5 resources is not a viable power health combination. He is easily defeated by just even the lightest of breezes. He is not the type of unit that's going to stay on the board, and the amount of resources that your opponent has to invest to remove him is very, very, very low. Ramming a 4 power unit into this is a huge trade-off for your opponents. Doesn't matter what the cost is unless it's something huge, unless they got the when played effect of it, if it has something like that. But just ramming something with 4 power into this before you can get the ability to use its effect or utilize its power in any other combination, it's just not a leader that's designed to survive. You flip him, you hope he survives for the one activation, alternating activation. You have to flip him in such an option that you have to be incredibly careful when you use this ability so you can get your attacks. But ultimately, your opponent's not going to have a lot of trouble dealing with this. And then on the front side, his ability isn't terrible because it does allow you to attack with the unit and gain some extra bonus, but you have to have more units than your opponent to be able to pull that off. So the way to pull this off for IG-88 is to run a lot of low-cost units that come with abilities that either keep them on the board or have extra abilities when they come into play, or are just not necessarily worth playing at the cost that they are. You do want to flood the board with more units than your opponent, or at least control what your opponent does, but there are other aspects and other combinations that do that better. If you want to run aggression villainy, you are better off running both Grand Inquisitor and Vader over this, or a different villainy leader and just running an aggression base. This is why I think that IG-88 needs a lot of help. I don't think that his power to health ratio was correctly done. The developers seem to think that he would have been too strong at a higher level, but I believe that most of the community pretty much agrees that that is not the case. Our next leader, again, another easy bottom of the barrel pick. We have Cheret Imwe, one with the Force. Front side action exhaust, give a unit +0/+2 for this phase. He flips on 5 resources into a 3/5. During the action phase, this unit isn't defeated by having no remaining HP. During the regroup phase, if he has no remaining HP, defeat him. Cheret does not have a deck-defining strategy. And a lot of leaders that are going to be successful will define what your deck does. Sabine defines your deck as throw attacks at your opponent's face and deal as much damage as possible to the base. Iden's deck strategy is defeat units to be able to pull health back onto your base. Vader's strategy is play cheap villainy units to build up so that way you can use his ability and then flip and wreck face. Cheret is, I'm going to give you the opportunity to maybe survive for the phase, and then I'm going to give myself the opportunity to maybe survive for the phase. Again, 1 takedown eliminates this leader. 4 cost versus a 5 cost, easy situation to make there. The one benefit that Cheret does have is if you can stack up some upgrades onto him and find some way to heal him before the regroup phase hits, if he has the overflowing damage, you can protect yourself from stuff like overwhelm if you have a sentinel ability on him, because overwhelm does not overwhelm the health on this because no excess damage was dealt. It's all still dealt to Cheret. As a whole, somebody's probably going to come up with something out there that makes Vigilance Heroism really good. The one good benefit of this specific leader is that he has a force trait, which means he enables all the force strategies. So your deck strategy is going to be run as many force units as possible. You're gonna, if you're just in Vigilance, you haven't picked a base, you're going to at least be able to run Obi-Wan Kenobi, Luke Skywalker, Yoda, and Kanan. You have this unit, Guardian of the Wills, and then you can run things like It Binds All Things, Jedi Lightsaber, and The Force is With Me, I believe is what the event is called. And our last leader, the rabblest of rousers here, is Emperor Palpatine, Galactic Ruler. For 1 resource and exhausting your leader and defeating a friendly unit, you can deal 1 damage to a unit and draw a card. When you have 8 resources, you deploy a 4/10 Force Imperial Sith unit that has a when deployed effect, take control of a damaged non-leader unit. On attack, you may defeat another friendly unit. If you do, deal 1 damage to a unit and draw a card. Emperor Palpatine's leader ability is incredibly underwhelming. Emperor Palpatine's leader unit side actually has some viability to it because you can utilize his leader ability to deal the damage onto something and then flip and take control of it, but your opponent still has the opportunity to respond to something like that. I know a lot of people are super excited for this card, and the art is good, but in terms of what Palpatine brings to the table, he does nothing that a Tarkin deck couldn't do better. In terms of an Imperial strategy, Tarkin is better. In terms of damage from your leader strategy, Vader is better. In terms of what you want to do for drawing cards, there isn't necessarily a villainy strategy that does well with drawing cards. You would just continue using mission planning, mission briefing for something like that, but you ultimately are spending so many resources, your board presence, one of your own resources, your once per turn leader ability to just deal 1 single damage and then draw a card. At least with Vader, you're dealing a damage to an opponent's unit or a unit, any unit, doesn't really matter, and also a damage to the base. So you're progressing the goal of defeating your opponent by removing their base from play, right? Dealing the damage, whether it's 25 or 30 health to the base. The benefit of being able to take control permanently of a non-leader unit is actually pretty decent, and the 4/10 stats are also pretty decent for an 8 cost, so it's not going to be very easily defeatable, but it's also not really doing anything on each of its attacks without sacrificing its own board presence. The Emperor Palpatine does not do anything right now, and I don't think he's going to ever really do anything worthwhile utilizing these effects. However, as I said in my preview video the last time that I talked about this, I hope someone proves me wrong and at least comes up with something that is viable. I just don't see the lines of making this character viable. He can win games for sure, but honestly, that's going to be more the deck that's built than this leader and his ability. And that is all she wrote for those 3 batches of leaders that I did go over. As I said, not a huge fan of tier lists, but I hope this helps you decide what you want to play as a leader. Obviously, there was some deck building in some of them, some just unit synergy in others, and then talking about how things could be better or how I'm not sure how things could be better. But ultimately, the idea of this video is to showcase to you what I think so you can make a better and more well-informed decision for yourself. If you end up playing a Palpatine deck and are super successful with it, congratulations, you've done well. If you end up playing a Leia deck and it's not successful to you, I'm sorry that that ended up happening, but not every leader is going to be good for every player. There's going to be specific play styles, and those are going to become very apparent when you get the cards in your hand and are able to play. And the same thing goes for me. With Boba Fett, Sabine, and Leia being my top leaders, and Iden being one of my top potential leaders, it could end up being that I play none of those. I play Grand Inquisitor, or I play Vader, or I play Tarkin, or I play Krennic. I don't see myself playing that last one. But in terms of what's going to stick, in terms of gameplay, that's going to matter, that's going to be left up to your local meta and what the competitive circuit is going to have once we start getting things like store championships, the Galactic Championship next year, and all the different things that are associated with organized play in the compete section of our C3OP. I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I did making it for you. It's still kind of just to throw things at the wall and see what sticks. Remember to like the video, subscribe to this channel, leave a comment down below on what you think of my thoughts and processes for these leaders, how you think the format of the video went, what else you want to see in this style of format, and hopefully we'll have other things lined up ready to go as we inch ever closer to the release of Star Wars Unlimited. And with that, I will see you in the stars.